Hey, everybody. Welcome to Saturday's Weekend Waypoints for SEC Extra at D1Baseball.com, presented by Plains Coffee Company. For the second week in a row, they're here with us. They'll be with us the rest of the season, Plains Coffee Company. Like I said last week, a bunch of good news about Plains Coffee Company before we get going. One, small business, husband and wife team, roasting coffee beans in the heart of SEC country. Doesn't get any more like local small business than that. You love that. Free shipping inside the United States on every order, every single order inside the United States, free shipping. Also, as you can see on the banner here below the screen, use the code BASEBALL at plainscoffee.com to get 10% off your order. And best of all, if you love your coffee, you'll appreciate the fact that they do not roast the beans until you place an order. The beans have not been sitting around for God knows how long, much like they are at a grocery store. These are freshly roasted as you order them. So they are fresh as they can possibly be once they get to your door. If you're not a coffee person, or perhaps if you are a coffee person and the partner in your life is not a coffee person, they also have tea options as well. So something for everybody at plainscoffee.com. So head over to plainscoffee.com, use the code BASEBALL for 10% off of your order. Appreciate those guys for sponsoring the Saturday edition of Weekend Waypoints, where today we will recap the first Friday of SEC action. How about that? I'd kind of forgotten, to be honest with you. I'd kind of forgotten how these games kind of come so close together in time, right? Like every game started between 6:30 Eastern and 7:30 Eastern, and that won't always be the case because of TV windows, and weather and everything else. But it does make for a chaotic few hours where there's just every game is in the same place, right? And so you're kind of having to keep your head on a swivel. It's something that every year I have to get readjusted to, just because in the non-conference season there's games starting at 3 and at 4 and at 5 and at 6 and 7, and so you have them a little bit more staggered. But in SEC play, it's a pretty tight window. And I'm not going to lie to you, it wasn't the prettiest baseball in a lot of the SEC games, but there were some interesting things, obviously. So we'll jump into all of that. Armstrong Grappling coming into on YouTube, commenting as always. This time he says, "Bad night for striped cats in the SEC." That is absolutely true. With the loss for Missouri, that is one type of tiger, and then Auburn, another version of a tiger. Yes, and a bad night for striped cats in the SEC. For one of those teams, I suspect there will be a decent number of bad nights throughout SEC play. But for the other, I think they'll get back on the horse for sure. So, although a tiger riding a horse probably not really safe for the tiger or the horse. All right, let's talk about our game of the day. I've got the box pulled up here. We're gonna do Ole Miss 5, South Carolina 4. Kind of a tense game that came down to the wire there. Let's pull the box up. I will present my screen here so you all can follow along with me here. So yeah, 5-4. Ole Miss over South Carolina. Kind of traded blows early on in the game, but the big hit was in the 6th inning. Luke Hill with a 2 RBI double put Ole Miss up, for good, and then added on in the 7th. Ultimately, South Carolina puts up a run in the 8th to draw a little bit closer, but then Connor Spencer closes the door on the game in the end. By the way, Connor Spencer, an elite closer walkout song, "Man in the Box" by Alice in Chains. Just a great old like hard rock song. Just goes really hard. Great closer song there for Connor Spencer. So kudos to him. He goes 5 up and 5 down to close the game when they needed him. That's huge, because so much with Ole Miss, we spent a lot of time thinking about the starting rotation with Ole Miss, and understandably so. But the bullpen was as much of a concern last year. They just didn't have, teams love to have their their formula, right? It's like we start this guy and he gives us 5 or 6 or whatever, and then we've got a guy we want to use to bridge it, or this, and if he doesn't bridge the gap all the way to the closer, we'll use this guy, and then we bring in the closer. And they just didn't have a formula last year. It was just scrambling all the time. And so to get what they got on the mound yesterday, where Gunnar Dennis gives you a solid start, I mean, that's perfectly perfectly acceptable as a start with 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, 3 runs. Like you'll take that for the most part in SEC play. But then they get Mitch Morrell, and Mason Nichols gave up a run, but was largely effective. Um, and then Connor Spencer closes the door. Like that's clean. That's what you're looking for. And Ole Miss just didn't have that last year. Neither did State, and we'll talk about that here shortly. What State did. So both teams kind of showed something that they weren't able to do last year, which I thought was really, really impressive. On the South Carolina side, this is their third 5-4 loss uh, against a good team. They lost both of their games against Clemson 5-4 and have now lost 5-4 to Ole Miss. So that's tough. They're 3 runs away, or I guess 6 runs away, because they would have had to score 2 to win those games, but just a handful of runs away from winning all of those games and being like 17-1. Now, ifs, ands, and buts, I get it, but it does show that like they're taking losses to these teams, but they're pretty close here. They also got a good start from Eli Jones, and I think the commonality here with Eli Jones and Gunnar Dennis is that both guys gave their teams acceptable starts. But you wonder if, those are for Fridays, you'd like to have a little bit more of someone who can control a game. And we'll talk about some guys later, Carter Holton. Luke Holman didn't have the best day. We'll also talk about that. But, typically what he gives you there, that's a Friday guy. Jack Caglione at his best now he doesn't pitch on Fridays, but you know what I mean. And so with Eli Jones and Gunnar Dennis, those are good starts, but I just wonder as they get into SEC play and a little bit more tape, especially on Gunnar Dennis, since it's his first year in the league, as more scouting report and video gets around on him, will those starts be able to hold up on Fridays in SEC play? Because on Fridays, so often you're looking for a dude who can dominate and control a game. And that's not necessarily what we saw with Eli Jones and Gunnar Dennis on Friday. Now, both good starts, you'll take that. And it worked out for Ole Miss in a win, but that is something to monitor moving forward there. So also good with, Ole Miss got what they got from Luke Hill. That's a guy who has struggled in the early going. You pull over here and see he's still just hitting 213. So obviously he's still very much on the way back, trying to claw back to respectability there offensively, but you like that he came through in a big spot there. So that's the game of the day. I imagine this will be a pretty competitive series all throughout the weekend. It felt like these teams were pretty good matches there. So an intriguing last couple of games this weekend in Oxford. If you want more information on Ole Miss's win, if you're an Ole Miss fan, Aaron Fitt was at the game last night. He's got a piece on d1baseball.com about the Ole Miss win, and how it came off as a gritty win, kind of a junkyard dog kind of win. That was his takeaway. So check that out if you are interested. Hello to Jeremy Scott, who jumps in with a Roll Tide. Unfortunately, a bad night for Bama sports. That is true. Basketball getting kind of blown off the court by Florida in the SEC tournament, and then the baseball team just kind of got run away from by Tennessee there. Good morning also to Connie, who says quite an opening Friday for league play. I agree. Like we learned a lot of stuff. Some of the games were kind of ugly, but you can learn from ugly games too, because things jump out to you and surprise you and give you things to think about you hadn't thought about. So I totally agree there. Let's talk about player of the day. As we always do first, let's go through some candidates, and going through these candidates gives me an opportunity to use those as little tangent jumping off points to talk about some other stuff that happened. But in the Florida A&M game, which was like a home run derby for the first 5 or 6 innings, neither Cade Fisher nor Ryan Prager threw the ball very well. Now they're good offenses, so you don't know how much you want to panic about that, but they both got hit around a little bit. Like I said, it was a little bit of a home run derby early on. I think Florida ended up hitting 5 home runs in what turned out to be an 8-6 win. But Cags had 2 of them, including one, kind of left on left breaking ball that he just kind of got his barrel to. Was honestly a pretty good piece of hitting. So, because he's so powerful, he's able to just kind of almost flick the ball out of the ballpark. So impressive stuff there. But Colby Shelton also 3 for 5 with a home run for the Gators there. Blake Burke for Tennessee, 3 for 5 with a home run. They were in a close game early, with the first few innings, they were kind of going back and forth with Alabama, and they just boat raced after that. A good start for AJ Causey. We'll talk about him in a minute. They got to Ben Hess, and for Alabama, you're going to need Ben Hess to be competitive against good offenses. Now, Tennessee might have the best lineup in the SEC. We might find that out in the end. There's a handful of teams, I think, that are in that conversation. It might be Tennessee, and so maybe this turns out to be just like hey, nobody can really slow down this offense. But for Alabama, you are looking for him to be more competitive against good lineups in the league than he was last night against Tennessee. But Blake Burke 3 for 5 with a home run there. Speaking of offensive performances, Kentucky put up 16 runs on Georgia, 16-10 win, which those two teams, I would not have. That score was not on my radar for that game. And I think it does hint at just some, they're both trying to figure some things out on the mound. Travis Smith hasn't been the guy that Kentucky's looked for on Fridays. He just hasn't been. They got some length from him. They stuck with him yesterday, and I think he got into the 6th inning, but he just continues to get hit around, and then Georgia just had all kinds of trouble getting Kentucky out. And Kentucky, not an offense that puts up runs, not usually puts up runs by the bunches, and that's what they did last night. And so Ryan Waldschmidt, 3 for 4, 2 doubles in the game. Nick Lopez, 3 for 5 with a home run and 2 runs batted in there for Kentucky in that win. On the other side of the ledger, in a losing effort, Corey Collins for Georgia got on base all 5 times, 2 for 2 with 2 home runs. So both his hits were home runs. That's pretty good. Got hit by a pitch twice and then walked once. So got on base all 5 times. Impressive day for Corey Collins, a guy they're going to need. Just a veteran with a lot of talent, but they need all the protection for Charlie Condon they can get. Jaden Davis from Vanderbilt, 4 for 5 with a triple and 2 runs batted in. Big day there for him for Vanderbilt in a comfortable win over Auburn. That's kind of the way to put that. And Carter Holton was a big part of that. And spoiler alert, we'll talk about that here shortly. But the player of the game is Nolan Souza for Arkansas. 3 for 4, 2 home runs, 3 runs batted in. Again, a comfortable win against Missouri. That was expected. That's really not a surprise. But I came up with him as the player of the game because we've talked so much about Arkansas in their offense, and should we be worried, and what do we make of this offense? And having someone like him, a freshman, have a game like that suggests that, okay, maybe some of these new faces are going to be the guys that make this offense, make this lineup go, along with, Kendall Diggs and guys like that. But so just great news. They're getting something like that from someone who's so young, so inexperienced in the SEC. So I think that's huge. So Nolan Souza, player of the game there. Quick break here because we've got some stuff in the chat here. Cameron Carter on YouTube. Yesterday was a day of surprises. He says, I'm a diehard LSU fan. I need something good today, or I might start feeling like we are frauds. Yeah, I mean, the offense just needs to get better. Like, I don't know how else to say that. And so when you don't get a good start from Luke Holman, obviously it makes life a lot harder. Now, that being said, that game got away from them late, but they were right in that game until late. So yeah, I understand some of the hand wringing. I get it. Especially when last year's offense was just so good. You're not used to the offensive struggle. I wouldn't say frauds. I still think the pitching is extremely good. I think you got yesterday by a team that was clearly motivated. That game got chippy. There was a lot of energy in the building. Duty Noble sounded great, even though I'm sure it wasn't a totally full house because you've probably got some fans who were in Nashville for the basketball tournament. Big day for Mississippi State yesterday, by the way, kind of the opposite of Bama, where big basketball win and big baseball win at night. So, and then on X, Clark Oliphant asks, is State back or is this an anomaly? I don't want to read too much into it, but I do think they're back in terms of the pitching is better. Like, they found a formula, right? They found some relievers that can bridge the gap. We'll talk about Nolan Stevens and the day he had yesterday. I still worry about the offense, but the starting pitching has been better, and they've actually got bullets to fire in the bullpen, which was just something they didn't have last year. They're throwing strikes a lot better. It seems like they're kind of more focusing on that versus missing bats. I mean, they still have guys who can miss bats, but They're in the zone. They're throwing quality strikes. They're competing. I liked the energy. I think more than anything else, I liked the energy State showed last night. So it's way too early to say State is back, but I mean, this team looks a lot like the body language and the energy around this team just feels so much better than it did last year. But um, the flip side, of course, is that you lost a midweek game to South Al and had to work hard to win another midweek game against New Orleans. So clearly, there's like still stuff they're working through there. But man, you'll take any win against LSU, any conference win, frankly. But that had to feel good against LSU. So I'm not gonna begrudge any State fan who's feeling him or herself a little bit this morning, because that was an impressive win yesterday. Tommy O'Neill on X did Gators wake people up last night? I mean, if anybody was sleeping on the Gators, that's on them. Because I think we know how good that offense is. They still got some things to figure out on the mound, but I think they showed you last night with whatever it was, 5 home runs, that, hey, you make mistakes to this offense and you're going to be in trouble. Armstrong says road teams on YouTube. Road teams went 1-6 in SEC last night. I know it's a big deal in football, but do you see that as a real factor in SEC baseball? I do in certain atmospheres. I think, the box, Baum Walker, both the Mississippi, Swayze and Dudy Noble. And there are others. Lindsey Nelson right now at Tennessee, that one might be arguably the best in the SEC because it's smaller. It feels very confined in Knoxville. Like the fans are right on top of the field. So yeah, I think it is a big factor in the right atmospheres. Now, there are some atmospheres in the SEC that are not that. Whereas in football, I think most, if not all, road atmospheres, maybe not Vanderbilt in football, right? But most road atmospheres are just tough in the SEC. I think there's fewer of those in baseball, but the ones that are good, I think those do affect the outcomes for sure. Did I get everything here? Angela Crotchfelt on YouTube, Auburn player mom here, just checking in. Tough one last night. Agree. But I'm super confident they'll bounce back. Like, I think that team is one I really don't worry about with tough losses. I think that's such a steady hand program right now. I feel good about their ability to bounce back. Now, of course, Vanderbilt's good, and playing at home, so it's going to be a tough couple of days. But Auburn can certainly fight back in that series. Good luck to Zach today and the rest of the season. All right, let's get back to it. I think I got everyone's stuff here. Yeah, okay. We'll run through pitcher of the week real quick. Some options here. I talked about AJ Causey, 6 2/3, 2 runs, 8 strikeouts against Alabama. I think I'm still not ready to say, Alabama's offense was fraudulent. Because I just think it's too small of a sample size, but I do think we saw that, okay, there's probably some middle ground between the way they've been swinging the bats and what to expect and what we saw last night. I think they'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but if you are Alabama, you do have to kind of adjust to, hey, we're going to see some pretty doggone good pitchers the next 10 weeks. And AJ Causey was, as good as he is, he's kind of just the start of it, just the tip of the iceberg, right? 2 relief appearances that I wanted to call out. One is for State, is Nolan Stevens, freshman left-hander, 5 2/3 innings pitched, 1 hit, 1 run, 2 walks with 8 strikeouts. I mean, if Dome is out, and I hope he's not, I hope we find out that, hey, it's not as bad as we fear. Great. But if he's not, could Nolan Stevens be an answer in the rotation? I thought he had a chance to help out offensively as much as on the mound, because he's a two-way guy. But he was great yesterday. Really, really impressive stuff for him. So, he made the game. Like, he shut down LSU in the middle of the game there after it had been a little bit back and forth early, and allowed the offense to go to work and eventually pull away. And it ends up being a pretty routine win for State over LSU. So, I mean, he attacked that game not like a freshman. Like, he did not look like a freshman out there. And so I'm intrigued. Consider me intrigued about seeing what's next for him this season. And then Brandon Neely for Florida and shutting down that A&M game. 3 scoreless innings with 1 hit allowed. He had not been particularly good leading up to yesterday. So, but they're going to need him, right? I mean, we remember how good he was late last year. So if Florida's going to be the best version of himself itself, they're going to need Neely to be that guy. And he was that guy yesterday. So we'll have to see more, but that is certainly a step in the right direction. So a couple of relief outings I wanted to call out there. And then Hagen Smith against Missouri. Sure, it's Missouri, but anytime you throw 6 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts in SEC play, you call that out because that's another great outing for a guy who's had numerous, at this point, 4 of his 5 outings have been great. So, but the pitcher of the day is Carter Holton for Vanderbilt. When you consider the quality of the opponent, Auburn's got a very good offense. And then the fact that he gave them 7 innings, to start off SEC play, 7 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts against Auburn. And, and I talked before on this show that, his ERA wasn't great, leading into this game, and it hasn't been all year, but that was kind of a little bit of a mirage. He had some batted ball luck. If you watched his outings, like much of the run scoring against him was on dribblers and bloops that just kind of happened to find gaps. And so I wasn't too worried about it when his ERA was 5 something or what have you. This is more fair. The result yesterday is more fair to what he's pitched like this season. And it feels like, and I'm guilty of this too, people have kind of forgotten a little about Carter Holton as one of the top arms in the SEC. And last year being injured part of the year and never quite seeming like himself is part of that. But let's not forget this guy was electric as a freshman 2 years ago. And so, could he be an SEC pitcher of the year type of guy? Absolutely. So big outing for him yesterday. Okay, quickly, game of the day, and good morning, Larry, on YouTube, coming in with a good morning. Today's game of the day. I'm going with LSU at State. Aaron Fitt, my colleague, may be there for part of it. He's in Mississippi. He wasn't sure where he was going to be today, Oxford or Starkville. He might try to spend a little bit of time at both, but follow him on Twitter, X. I'm sure if you're watching this, you follow him, but that just gives you a heads up on where he might be today. But a good pitching matchup, Gage Jump versus Cal Steven. So that's intriguing, obviously. How does Gage Jump fare after Luke Holman didn't fare as well in the first game of the weekend? And then can Cal Steven kind of keep up what he's done so far this season? Now that Dome is down, at least for now, he's more important than ever in that rotation. So I'm intrigued by that. And like I mentioned earlier, yesterday's game got chippy. Like there's some juice in that game yesterday. And so I imagine with today being a Saturday game, that Saturday afternoon game, it'll be even more so. Those Saturday games tend to be kind of the best atmospheres in the SEC. So we will see, but I'm looking forward to that. And then what can LSU's lineup muster? It wasn't a good performance yesterday, flat out. And it's not been a great offense to this point, even if the numbers, you look at the team stats and they don't look bad. But you look at the individual results and they're just not, even for an offense that we know is probably not going to be as good as last year's. They just don't, the production just hasn't matched the talent there yet. So I'll be fascinated to see what they muster today. Quickly, one more thing. Kuzi on X says thoughts on the Gators and Texas A&M. My big thoughts are give Ryan Prager and Cade Fisher another week. Let's see what they do moving on in SEC play, because I'm not going to hold yesterday with how good those lineups are against them. That's kind of my big takeaway. But we saw how dangerous those lineups are, how quickly they can strike. I'm interested in the next 2 games to see if the offense continues that way or if it can settle in a little bit. Plugs. Mark Etheridge, my colleague, speaking of Florida and A&M, he was at the game yesterday. He's got a piece on the site on that game. Aaron, as I mentioned, is in Mississippi. He wrote yesterday on Ole Miss in South Carolina, so go check that out. And also check out D1 Digest. Grab your cup of coffee. Maybe it's a cup of coffee made with Plains Coffee Company beans. So grab your cup of joe with your D1 Digest. Thank you for joining me on this particular Saturday morning cup of joe, if you will, and enjoy the Saturday around the SEC. I think that yesterday was just kind of the start. I mean, we think we know some things, and then SEC play starts and we learn some things differently, but you guys know as well as I do that, what happens today and what happens in May sometimes are very, very different things. So I know you're just as excited to be along for the ride as I am. But for today, enjoy the Saturday baseball. I hope the weather is beautiful wherever you are and you're able to get to a game or get outside and get some fresh air either way and enjoy the baseball. I appreciate you guys for joining me. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning for Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints.